Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to use my business issues worksheet to take each one of the client's major business goals and determine which of 5 business issues or problems are created by each one of these goals. And so you'll see me put words in all caps like this, and I do this because there are things that will need to be defined in the contract. For example, I have this concept right here, royalty payment allocation. Okay, and so the way that a royalty contract usually works is that a person isn't paid a royalty right at the time that the content is sold. They'll usually pay that royalty maybe quarterly or yearly or 2 times a year, who knows? But whenever that content is sold or licensed, then David Chappelle is going to want to have some type of royalty allocation made so that he can get credit for that particular sale of that content, so that he can be paid his royalty as they accumulate. Now, as you can see, I'm working on my business issues worksheet, and as I'm going along, ideas are popping into my head. That is why you don't want to try to just sit down and just cold write a contract. You're not going to be able to analyze all of the problems that are going to go along. So as you can see, I'm going to show you how this looked before. In my first business issues worksheet, my client goal read as follows. Chappelle wants a royalty payment allocation each time an episode of Chappelle's Show is distributed by Chappelle's Show licensor, by the Chappelle Show licensor. Now I want you to see, as I'm going along, I start to realize, hey, if I'm thinking in the best interest of my client, if he's Dave Chappelle, he's not going to just want a royalty allocation each time the Chappelle Show is sold for viewing. He's gonna want some type of royalty allocation anytime any content is sold that uses the word Chappelle Show. Okay, so that's gonna change up how I word this goal now. So I begin to develop that goal even further as I go along. So now that goal, or goal number 1 for Dave Chappelle, is going to be Chappelle wants a royalty payment allocation each time Chappelle Show content. So that is now changing a term that I need to define. So at some point in the definition section of the contract, I'm going to need to define what I mean when I say Chappelle Show content, because I am not just talking about Chappelle Show episodes here. I am saying Dave Chappelle's name is on this show. Anytime, any type of content, whatever it may be, t-shirts, caps, the Chappelle Show episodes, whatever it may be that bears the name Chappelle Show, Dave Chappelle wants to generate some type of royalty payment allocation. Okay, so I'm broadening out that goal so that it will encapsulate all of those things that are going to touch or concern Chappelle Show. Okay, and so now that changes my goal up a little bit. So now I want to show you how then I go across that worksheet. And so now when I look at this part of the goal, and remember I told you before, sometimes you may need to break up that goal, okay, so that you can analyze all of the issues that come out of any one part of that particular goal, okay? And so here I'm just stopping on this first part, this royalty payment allocation. That is going to create what I call a standards issue regarding the definition of what I mean when I say royalty payment allocation. What I'd like to do is I like to state the problem or issue that the goal or part of the goal is going to create. And then what I like to do is I like to put a little note here that says what kind of problem solver I'm going to use to fix that particular problem. So as I talk to you about my 5-7-10 contract analysis procedure, we're dealing with our 5 business issues of concern that are created by any goal that the client may have or part of that goal. And then we're using our problem solvers or our contract concepts. There are 7 contract concepts that are used to solve these business issues. So you're going to have contract concepts like your declarations or your covenants. These are contract concepts that are used throughout the entire contract. And I teach you in greater detail how to write a contract using all of these particular elements. And then there are going to be 10 basic contract sections that I use for every single contract that I write. And all of these items are organized in those 10 sections. And so here I know that in section 2, which is the definition section, I'm going to have a declaration that is going to define what I mean when I say royalty payment allocation. So this is what I mean when I say that writing the contract becomes as easy as plugging in the pieces, because on your business issues worksheet, you want to just notate all of the places where these particular contract provisions are going to be placed throughout the contract. And so here I already know that I'm going to have a definition in the declaration section. When I get ready to go back to that contract and start drafting out the declarations or the definitions section of the contract, I can just come straight to my business issues worksheet and pick out all of the things that are highlighted as declarations, okay? And it's also going to tell me right here where I am putting this in the contract. All right, so now here I'm moving down to this other part of the goal that Dave Chappelle is going to have. And that is each time Chappelle Show content is distributed by a Chappelle Show licensor. Okay, so now I'm down here to this part. I'll just read you the entire goal here. So Chappelle wants a royalty payment allocation to be made each time Chappelle Show content is distributed by a Chappelle Show licensor or owner in any manner, mode, or format, including technological viewing formats that may exist in the future, including but not limited to DVDs. Okay, so this is my goal here, all right? And so here I can see the money issues that are created by this goal, all right? And as you'll learn, if you take my full class about this particular procedure, is that whenever you have money, you're gonna have risk. And whenever you have risk, you're gonna have to control that risk, all right? And so I have a money issue here regarding loss of royalties if Chappelle Show licensors do not make Dave Chappelle aware of all licensed deals and Chappelle Show licensees, so that all possible royalty payment allocations are made. All right, so this is going to be the money issue here. It's a loss of royalties. All right, and this is created because, again, Dave Chappelle does not own the content. He'll never be the licensor. So he is relying on those licensors to let him know when they enter into deals with respective licensees like Netflix, like HBO Max, okay? So now what we have is we have a situation where CBS Viacom, who now owns Comedy Central, is selling this content streaming on their own platform, and they're making even more money by licensing this content to other licensees like Netflix and HBO, who are also selling and streaming this content on their respective platforms as well. And so whenever this is taking place, nobody, the licensees, HBO Max, Netflix, they don't, the way that the contract is set up, they are dealing with the licensor, the owner of the contract. They have no reason to believe that they need to contact anybody else. Okay, how it came to be that Dave Chappelle is not the licensor of this content is of no consequence to them, okay, until they do find out. And so that is what happened here. They found out from Dave Chappelle. And so it's like having a situation where I own a thing, okay, and I use that thing to make Chappelle Cakes, okay, and so I'm making my Chappelle Cakes for $10. Every time I sell a cake, I have to give Dave Chappelle his 50%. And so I'm just moving right along. That is the thing that was in at the time. As time goes on, I merge with another company, CBS, Viacom. And so now the end thing is Chappelle Pies and Cookies. Okay, and so I start making these Chappelle Pies and Cookies under the new merged entity with the new company. They have no idea about Dave Chappelle because this company does not even know anything about DVDs or Chappelle Cakes. It's not the end thing anymore. The thing now is streaming. They have no idea what's a DVD, okay? And so when they then find out that Dave Chappelle was involved in a contract where he was to be paid royalties for the sale and the distribution of this particular content, then they start to think to themselves, okay, well, you know, I guess, what can I do? Okay, so now what you have is Dave Chappelle saying he got his license back. Don't mistake that to mean Dave Chappelle now owns Chappelle Show. Why would CBS Viacom now just give Dave Chappelle the Chappelle Show? That is not what's occurring, okay? He's just using the term loosely to say, I got my name back, I got my license back. He has his ownership interest or his obligation that CBS Viacom or whoever is paying him the applicable royalties on content, not just DVD sales, but now also, I'm assuming, streaming formats. I'm hoping that he had the sense enough to broaden out that goal like I have done here. And so if he has, then any type of content that is going to be bearing the name Chappelle Show should be included in this particular deal, okay? All right. So now you can see what I mean when I say my money issue, okay? And then how do I solve this problem that it's created by this money issue? It is going to be solved with a covenant, some type of covenant obligating or creating an obligation by any Chappelle Show licensor, and I'm going to define that, okay? So you'll see here that this term, Chappelle Show content and Chappelle Show licensor, you will see those will create standards issues. So for Chappelle Show content, this would include any content. And see here, what I normally do is I just make a note here, but I'm doing this in this highlight in yellow to show you how this would build itself out in the contract, okay? And so this would include any content bearing the name Chappelle Show in any manner, mode, or format whatsoever, including but not limited to, here's an example, caps, t-shirts, or any merchandise, including reproductions of Chappelle Show episodes in any technological viewing format that may exist in the future, including but not limited to DVD format. This is how that original contract should have been written way back when Dave Chappelle first entered into this arrangement with Comedy Central, okay? And so this is how it should also be written now. I don't know what type of arrangement he entered into with CBS, Viacom, Netflix, HBO, whoever they may be. But I will just tell you, I don't think this will be the last we'll hear of Dave Chappelle having some type of contract snafu with any of these companies, okay? So, at any rate, I also have come here and created a standards issue regarding the definition of Chappelle Show licensor. So that's going to be any person or entity having ownership rights in Chappelle Show content, having the right to license the right to use Chappelle Show content. So this will be any successive owner, because who knows what could happen in the future. CBS Viacom could sell Comedy Central to somebody else. So whoever that is would not want to be excluded from these particular obligations. So these obligations would also pass down to any successive owners of this particular content, because Dave Chappelle would not know. Nobody is coming to Dave Chappelle to say, hey, I sold Comedy Central. Nobody is coming to Dave Chappelle to say, hey, I entered into a licensing deal for episodes of Chappelle's Show, okay? That is what happened in the past contract, the way that it was written. But here, my hope is to fix all of those problems here by using this business issues worksheet, because now I can see all of these problems that are occurring. Okay, and so here we know now that we need a covenant that would create an obligation on the part of any Chappelle Show licensor in the future, and that obligation will create a right in Dave Chappelle to receive that performance, okay? And so this is going to go in what I call the business section of the contract. So you'll look to see me build out that particular covenant in that contract in that particular place. And so wherever there's money, there's going to be risk. And so here is my risk issue regarding Dave Chappelle is not the actual owner. So there is risk here because he is having to rely on the owner or the licensor, whoever they may be, to let him know of a license deal that is created regarding the Chappelle Show content. And so if the licensor doesn't notify him, he won't know that a royalty payment allocation needs to be assessed. So here is my risk issue, and we're going to solve this risk issue with a covenant, also creating an obligation in the Chappelle Show licensor, and you'll see this particular obligation over in the remedies and indemnities section of the contract. So this is a different type of obligation that that particular licensor is going to have here. And so here you'll see, I'm going to go over so you can see that this will create a component of exposure on the part of any licensor, because if they don't let Dave Chappelle know, and if he does find out, that licensor, whoever they may be, CBS, Viacom, or whoever, will have to bear the responsibility, the liability. They will have to pay that liability off, meaning liability payments probably to also whoever that person is that is licensing that content, including any type of damages which may become owing and due to Dave Chappelle. So this is what I mean when I say you want to create consequences that would lessen the likelihood that a person will not follow through with their obligations under that contract, because you need some type of carrot and stick to keep everybody in line, make it more likely that those successive owners of this content will make sure that they are letting Dave Chappelle know anytime this content is licensed, okay? So now here we also have to control this risk. with a covenant. Okay, so this is how I am controlling the money issue here. So the money issue is controlled with this covenant. This is the covenant here, and it will obligate any Chappelle Show licensor to notify Dave Chappelle of any and all inquiries or communications whatsoever regarding the license or use of Chappelle Show content. So when I say Chappelle Show content, you'll begin to see now that that is going to include a whole host of things, including the license of Chappelle Show episodes. This is going to include anything that is bearing the name Chappelle Show, and this is going to increase the likelihood of generating royalty payment allocations, in the end, royalty payment. Now, in my course, I also talk about 3 types of termination events. Termination or default events. Some contracts may not necessarily have a termination feature. It may be something that is causing some type of breach in the agreement that is what we call a default event. Okay, and these are going to be in the form of friendly, unfriendly, and neutral. And so we know what unfriendly means. We have somebody that is breaching the contract, but sometimes you'll have a friendly termination or default. Sometimes the contract ends in 1 year or ends in 3 years. The contract ends, everybody has upheld their obligations under the contract, and so the contract terminates. So that's a friendly termination. But then there are some things that happen that create a neutral termination or neutral default. These are situations and maybe somebody dies, or maybe there's some type of bankruptcy. It's not an issue of a person intentionally failing to uphold their obligation under the contract. And so then there are also what I call your walk away and your non-walk away types of defaults or terminations. Your walk away are those where the obligation under that particular contract is breached in such a way that the person just wants to walk away. They just want to, pick up their pieces and hit the road type of a situation. And then there are some situations where it is a default or a breach where maybe there is some type of a consequence that can solve the problem in money or whatever it may be, and the contract can just go on. The parties can go on in that particular contract. So these are your types of terminations or your defaults, but you want to make that default or breach of the agreement, the consequences of it, such that a person would never ever think about doing. But because of the ownership setup of this particular contract, where Dave Chappelle is not really the owner of the content, it does him no good to terminate the agreement. He makes more money whenever anybody is entering into these license agreements, because that is how he is going to generate his royalties. So it's not necessarily to his benefit to have a full unfriendly termination walkaway event, this particular context. But there will be other types of remedies and indemnity types of contract concepts in the contract that can create the deterrent consequences of breach of the agreement, which would make a person not want to not uphold their obligations under the agreement, i.e. not letting Dave Chappelle know that they're entering into these license agreements so that he can earn the royalty payments that he deserves. And so this is how you take a client goal and you determine what all of the major business issues, those 5 business issues, money, risk, control, standards, and end game issues, are created by that particular client goal.